What breaks us is not the big fall, but the silent accumulation. It's not the storms that break us. It's the slow erosion we ignore. Most people think losing direction comes with a crash, a life crisis, a major failure. But more often it's subtle. It's built in the daily silences, in the ideas we abandon before they even breathe. It's the passions we postpone. The small no's we whisper to ourselves, quietly killing the parts of us that still believe. A dream dismissed. A project left unfinished. One step skipped becomes a path lost. Each day we trade a piece of ourselves for convenience. We silence our instincts in favor of expectations. We tell ourselves it's not the right time, or maybe someday. But that someday rarely comes. Instead, it becomes a graveyard of intentions. These tiny retreats, these micro-quittings, don't feel like betrayal. But they are. They chip away at the very structure of who we are. Not all at once, but one forgotten dream at a time. Over time, the cost becomes unbearable. We keep walking, working, talking. On the surface, we appear intact. But something underneath begins to fade. That quiet fire, our hunger for more, for meaning, dims. We don't even notice it going out. That's how dangerous these small surrenders are. They don't make noise. They simply remove light little by little. We tell ourselves we're being practical, that the world is hard and dreams are for the lucky. But practicality without purpose is just survival dressed as wisdom. Deep down, a part of us is still whispering, "You were made for more." But when we don't listen, that voice grows quieter. Not because the calling is gone, but because we're no longer willing to hear it through the noise of resignation. You don't lose your purpose in a moment. You lose it in the margins, in the times you talked yourself out of trying, out of believing, out of caring. And the worst part? The world keeps spinning. No one sees what you're burying, but you do. Your soul does. And it never forgets what you gave up on. 2. We quit in silence and call it real life. We don't announce the moment we give up. We disguise it. We tuck it inside words like busy, realistic, and mature. But in truth, we're surrendering. Not with a dramatic exit, but with a quiet internal nod that says, "This isn't worth it anymore." We stop writing. We stop dreaming. We stop even thinking about what once lit us up. And yet life continues. Bills get paid. Deadlines are met. But the fire? Gone. Most people won't see it. They'll praise you for your responsibility. They'll admire your discipline. But what they won't see is how many times you said no to yourself. How many late nights you stared at the ceiling, wondering where that version of you went. The one who wanted more, who believed in better. That version didn't die. It was silenced. It became inconvenient to keep hoping. You tell yourself you're just adapting. But adaptation without intention becomes slow self-erasure. It's easier to say, "I'm too old now," or "It's too risky," than to admit you're afraid. Afraid that trying again might hurt. That failing might be humiliating. So instead you settle. And settling is the most elegant form of quitting, because it looks like you're playing safe when in truth you're playing small. This kind of quitting doesn't leave visible wounds. It leaves emptiness. You go through the motions but feel disconnected. You succeed on paper but something inside you feels like a fraud. And every time you celebrate a victory that means nothing to your soul, you fall a little further from your true path. It's not the lack of achievement that hurts. It's the lack of alignment. Eventually you forget what you used to love. Not because it stopped mattering, but because you convinced yourself it was no longer possible. And in doing so, you built a life that fits someone else. You learned to smile through compromises and call it adulthood. But deep inside, the ache remains. You're not tired from doing too much. You're tired from doing the wrong things for too long. 3. The mind knows when you're abandoning yourself. You can fake it for the world, but your mind keeps the score. It knows when you said yes to things that drained you. It remembers the exact moment you gave up on what mattered. You may smile for others, keep moving through routines, and fill your calendar with obligations. But your subconscious is recording every silent surrender. And those records? They become your new identity. Not because it's who you are, but because it's who you've agreed to be. Each time you abandon a personal truth, your self-trust erodes. The mind notices. It whispers doubts that grow louder with repetition. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe this isn't meant for me. And it doesn't stop there. It starts sabotaging your confidence in other areas. Relationships, decisions, creativity. You question yourself more. You second guess, and the voice of certainty fades. This is how emotional erosion begins, not in one grand breakdown but in micro moments where you pretend not to care just to cope. You avoid the discomfort of your own unmet needs. You numb the ache with distractions. But deep down you feel it. That quiet grief of not showing up for yourself. And the more you ignore it, the heavier it gets. Until the weight of who you aren't suffocates who you were meant to be. Eventually, you don't just abandon your dreams. You abandon your self-concept. You begin to believe that settling is your destiny. You lower your expectations. You talk yourself out of joy before life even has the chance to deliver it. And your nervous system adapts to this dull, quiet disappointment. It becomes your new normal, a life without color, depth, or personal spark. But here's the truth, your mind isn't your enemy. It's your alarm system. Every whisper of unease is a signal. Every twinge of guilt, frustration, or emptiness is your inner self knocking. Not to punish you, but to pull you back home. Because no matter how far you drift, your deepest self never stops hoping you'll return to what matters. 4. Micro-quick decisions create internal misalignment. At first, the shift is subtle. You compromise here, delay there. You take a job that pays well but drains your soul. You stay silent in conversations where your truth wants to speak. You keep saying it's fine when everything inside you says it's not. These choices feel small but they stack. And what begins as survival strategy quickly becomes a betrayal of who you really are. Misalignment doesn't arrive loudly, it builds in quiet defiance of your deepest values. This misalignment shows up in strange ways. You start feeling tired even after a full night's sleep. Motivation disappears. Joy becomes rare. You distract yourself more but feel fulfilled less. And the worst part? From the outside, it looks like everything's okay. That's the cruelty of silent misalignment. It doesn't disrupt your life instantly, it deteriorates your spirit over time. It eats away at your vitality, one overlooked intuition at a time. You might still perform well. You might still meet deadlines, hit goals, show up for others. But internally there's a split. The person you're pretending to be is slowly drifting from the person you're meant to become. And every time you ignore that tension, your emotional compass loses clarity. You no longer know what excites you, what matters, what you want. You just know something feels off. That off feeling is your soul resisting the false version of your life. It's the unease you feel in moments of silence. It's the irritability that has no cause. It's your nervous system screaming for authenticity in a life that's running on autopilot. And if you don't address it, that misalignment will cost you your passion, your peace, your purpose. But it's not too late to realign. One courageous decision at a time can begin the repair. You don't need to destroy everything. You just need to start choosing what's true again. Speak up where you used to stay quiet. Say no where you always said yes. Take one step, no matter how small, back in the direction of your own integrity. That's how alignment is restored. Slowly, bravely, consistently. 5. One day you get used to not trying. At first it stings. You feel the tension of not following through, the guilt of ignoring your calling, the ache of postponed action. But then it becomes normal. You convince yourself it's fine. You stop checking in with your goals. You stop dreaming aloud. And before long, the part of you that once dared to try falls silent. Not because you failed, but because you stopped beginning. Not because it was too hard, but because you told yourself the lie that it didn't matter. This is how resignation sets in, not in big moments, but in little ones. You stop applying, stop creating, stop reaching out. You delete the draft, skip the workout, ignore the impulse to say what you feel. You tell yourself, tomorrow, until tomorrow becomes next year. And eventually, the absence of action starts to feel safer than the possibility of disappointment. Not trying feels more comfortable than risking yourself again. Soon, your life becomes a museum of unfinished intentions. Projects half-started, passions half-lived, conversations half-had. You look around and see traces of who you wanted to be, but none of it is fully alive. You begin to settle for the numbness. It hurts less than the fear of trying again. But deep inside there's a grief you can't name. A silent mourning for the courage you used to carry. What's worse is how the mind adapts. It rewires your identity around inaction. You stop seeing yourself as someone who builds, leads, or dares. You become the bystander of your own potential, watching, hoping but never moving. And the longer you live this way, the more you forget that you have a choice. That power was never outside of you, it was always in the trying. But here's the shift. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to disrupt the pattern. One act of defiance against the silence. One courageous attempt where you once gave up. Reclaim one small spark of effort, and from it, rebuild the fire. Because every time you try again, no matter how small the action, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You prove to your soul that it's not over. 6. Redemption begins with small restarts. You don't need a grand comeback to reclaim yourself. In fact, most redemption stories begin quietly, with one decision to stop abandoning what still matters. You pick up the journal again. You open the book you meant to read. You send that message. These small choices might look insignificant, but they carry a sacred weight. Each one is a whisper that says, "I haven't given up on me." The power of restarting lies in its subtlety. It doesn't shout, it builds. The habit you abandoned months ago? Pick it back up for 5 minutes. The passion you shelved? Explore it one evening this week. The goal that scares you? Write one page, take one step, have one conversation. You don't need momentum. You just need a spark. And that spark, nurtured daily, reignites everything you thought was lost. These micro-movements rebuild your confidence from the inside out. You remember what it feels like to choose yourself. You reclaim the right to act without perfection, to show up even when it's messy. And slowly, the silence of resignation is replaced by the steady rhythm of intention. You start trusting yourself again, not because everything is fixed but because you're finally moving. Restarting doesn't require full clarity. It only requires honesty. Ask yourself, what did I once love that I walked away from? What truth have I been avoiding? What small promise can I keep to myself today? When you begin with honesty, even if it's painful, you create space for real change. You build forward, not from pressure but from alignment. Redemption is not about fixing who you've become. It's about returning to who you really are. Piece by piece, step by step. You don't need to roar to rebuild. Whispers of truth are louder than a lifetime of silence. And when you honor the spark, the fire will return. Not suddenly, not perfectly, but powerfully. 7. You deserve to come back to yourself. There's a part of you that remembers who you were before the exhaustion, before the delays, before the quiet giving up. That version of you still exists, waiting, watching, hoping you'll come back. And here's the truth most people never hear. You deserve to return. Not because you've earned it, but because you are enough as you are to begin again. You've paid with silence. You've paid with longing. Now it's time to return with courage. Coming back to yourself isn't a dramatic act. It's a soft decision. It's sitting with your own thoughts and listening for the voice beneath the noise. It's noticing what still brings you alive. What still tugs at your heart. What still keeps showing up even when ignored. These things aren't accidents. They are reminders. Clues. Invitations to remember that you were made for more than routine and resignation. You weren't born just to function. You were born to feel, to pursue, to create something only you can create. And every time you walked away from yourself, it wasn't weakness. It was protection. Survival. But now that you've survived, it's time to live. And to live fully, you must reclaim what was once surrendered. Your voice, your fire, your right to try again. No one else can do this for you. No external success, no perfect relationship, no applause will replace what your soul needs most. Alignment. That sense that you are living in sync with who you were meant to be. And the only way back is through your own permission. You must choose to come home to yourself. Not tomorrow, not when it's easier, but now. This is not a restart for your goals. It's a resurrection of your essence. A return to the truth that you are still whole even if you've paused. Still powerful even if you've been quiet. Still worthy even if you've been waiting. So breathe. Begin. Let this be the moment your story changes, not with force but with intention. You are not too late. You are right on time. The quiet collapse you didn't notice. You didn't lose yourself in one big moment. It wasn't a breakdown or an explosion. It was slower than that. Softer. You stopped chasing that dream, not because it died but because you got tired. You stopped believing, Not because you had proof it wouldn't work, but because no one else seemed to. Every day, something small was left behind. A desire, a passion, a part of you. And you told yourself it was fine. Normal. Grown up. But deep down, something started to ache. A quiet grief for the life you could have lived. There is no wound louder than a dream abandoned quietly. And yet, most people won't notice. Not your friends, not your family, sometimes not even you. 'Cause life moves on. Responsibilities pile up. The calendar gets full. But in the silence of the night, in the pause between tasks, the question returns, what happened to me? That's not depression. That's disconnection. A loss of self masked by productivity and perfectionism. This video is not about blame. It's about awakening. About recognizing that the microdesistentious, the daily decisions to step away from your potential, aren't harmless. They accumulate, and they begin to reshape you into someone you were never meant to be. Not broken but dimmed. Not lost but paused. And if that sounds familiar, stay until the end. Because what we'll uncover together isn't just what went wrong, but how to finally come back home to yourself. You don't need another motivational speech. You need truth. You need to see the mirror clearly, maybe for the first time in years. And in that reflection, not judgment, but hope. Because if you've disconnected piece by piece, you can rebuild piece by piece. That's what this video is. A map, a mirror, and a movement toward the version of you that never stopped hoping for more. At the end, I'll give you something to help start that return. A powerful free manual that's already helped thousands take back control of their direction, discipline, and daily purpose. But first, let's talk about what's been quietly stealing your life without permission. Conclusion: the day you stop leaving yourself behind. Maybe no one saw the moments you gave up. Maybe you didn't even notice them happening. But your soul did. And that ache you've been carrying? That quiet weight pressing on your chest when the noise dies down? That's your inner self calling you back. Not to perfection. Not to the past. But to the path you were always meant to walk. The one where you show up fully. Where your voice is heard again, not by the world but by you. You don't fix a life overnight. But you can shift it in a moment. With one small yes. With one whisper of, I'm not done. You deserve that. You've been strong in silence for long enough. Now it's time to rebuild, not as who you've been forced to be, but as who you were born to be. The version of you that doesn't surrender so easily. The one who remembers. The one who believes again. This isn't just about motivation, it's about restoration. You've survived 1,000 quiet endings. Now it's time for your return. Not for applause. Not for approval. But for alignment. Because when you return to yourself, even the smallest victories feel sacred. And when you stop abandoning yourself, you start becoming unstoppable. Brain, to help you take that first step back, I've created something just for you. Briefcase, download your free daily discipline and emotional focus manual, a powerful tool designed to reconnect you with your purpose, build mental resilience, and rewire your focus from the inside out. Don't let another day pass in silence. This is your moment. This is your return.